Hi, it's Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and we're here for an interview on the Ask the Fairy show that we are just getting launched here. And I'm here today with Jason in Hong Kong, who is a follower of the Crappy Childhood Fairy and who got in touch to see about asking a question on the show. So hi, Jason, how are you?
Hi, Anna. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So you told me about a particular problem, and I didn't want you to tell me all about it on email, and I just wanted to hear about it here so that it's fresh and you can kind of tell us what you're dealing with here.
Okay. Let me try to keep it short, and then you can ask me questions if you have any. But basically, I have issues with my parents, not surprisingly, and I have been not in contact with them for over 3 years now at this point. I have occasionally an email with them, but I haven't seen them in 3 years. And we do live in different countries, so that makes it, I guess, a little bit easier to have no contact. But they often want to visit and then see me and so on. And then my question to you is, um, does it make sense at what point or at any point does it make sense to see them again? And my therapist seems to suggest it might be a good idea, and they're also seeing a therapist, and their therapist, I've spoken with her too, seems to think that's a good idea. But I don't know if that's a good idea. So I would sort of love your thoughts on
A
that.
third opinion, fourth opinion.
Yeah.
And your parents want to see you, is that right?
Yeah, my parents really desperately want to see me, and I just have absolutely no desire to see them.
So may I ask what happened? Why don't you want to see them?
It's been, well, 3 years ago, basically, sort of like a family incident happened where I felt my parents threw me under the bus for the sake of quote unquote family. Um, but where I basically felt that they put their own interest over mine interest, and they made that choice, and it got me angry enough that I cut off contact, and then the anger is something I've always been very uncomfortable with as an emotion or emotion in general. But I learned that in this case, I'm actually really grateful I got angry because it gave me the courage to cut off the contact and to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reflecting on, like what's going on here, because obviously this is not, quote unquote normal, whatever normal is. But then I realized it's actually been a long sort of childhood, up until now, kind of relationship where um, sort of there's a lot of emotional and physical absence and also emotional abuse. I would use that term at this point, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they, and then so whenever they wanted to visit me or see me, I always felt like like my first reaction is panic attack. And I remember at the time when I was with a roommate in when I was studying and in graduate school, and my roommate thought that was so weird because your parents want to see you. Isn't that great? I would love my parents to visit me. And it's at that moment I started to realize, hey, having panic attacks when your parents see you is, like that's not normal for most people apparently. And then so I started to realize that, there's lots of things not right. And 3 years ago, I made that decision that they're not responsible for my happiness. I am. But if that means I need to have them out of my life in order to be happy, because they definitely don't make me happy with them in my life, then I need to cut them off. And then so I guess also, and so I'm thinking, does it make sense to have them back in my life? Can they play a positive role? I'm not convinced they can. But there's also an argument to be said for, in order to move on, I need to close some, I need to find some kind of closure or something.
They bothered to go to therapy. I guess that's shows some sign of willingness to figure out what's going on.
I made that suggestion because at some point I wasn't decided on whether I wanted to completely shut them out. Mm-hmm. And then my therapist at some point suggested, hey, maybe it would be a good idea for them to see a therapist.
Mhm.
And so made that suggestion, and to give them credit, they actually did that.
Mhm.
So that's a big, but what I see is that they made maybe 10% progress,
Mhm.
a little bit of progress, and they think it's 90 or 100%,
Mhm.
and then they revert back into old patterns. And then so yeah, it's, I mean, to be fair, right? It's, like they have been who they are for most of their lives. They're old people. It's really going to be hard for them to change. I don't expect them to change,
Mhm.
um, but that also doesn't mean I need to see them.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I have a younger brother, and we are very different people. But what's very validating for me is that he feels similar to, I sort of start to see my side of things. And yeah, we had a long chat because he just had a daughter, uh, and then so that's really good news. And he has been thinking about what it means to be a good father, and a good parent in general. And he also knows that, like, we don't want to become our own parents. Um, and so we have chats about that.
Okay, wow. So, well, it's a little tricky because I don't really know the nature of the offense. And it sounds like, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about it, about like, what did they do? It's hard to understand, what the options would be here.
So there's the specific incident of 3 years ago that triggered it, but um, you know, and maybe that would be a good starting point to
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about this. Although, I wouldn't say that's the only thing. That's really just a
I
symptom
get it. Yeah.
of stuff. But
Yeah.
what happened 3 years ago was basically, like my parents always have been asking me to do things I don't want to do and be a person that I don't want to be, because, they wanted me to be this person that would make them look good and look happy and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I did my best for a long time, but there are also moments where, like, I'm like, okay, I need to do this and I want to do this. And then they would give me a lot of grief for that. But 3 years ago, my uncle, which is my mom's younger brother, he has a daughter who has a wedding, and I've had a difficult relationship with this uncle for a while. Growing up, he was a great uncle for me. He was spoiling me. But then later on, when I got older, for some reason, he turned into this really obnoxious old man who was being mean on people and picking on people, and enjoying that kind of power over people.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's sort of like a more senior, older man at this point, it's really hard to push back on him.
Mm-hmm.
And but so his daughter was getting married, and we've me and my brother, we've had, this sort of okay relationship with the daughter, I guess. We would occasionally see her and have dinner with her, but that was it. But for some reason, she decided to not invite me and my brother to the wedding, and she did invite my parents. And the reason she didn't invite me and my brother was, and she said, apparently, that me and my brother did something so bad that she wanted us, she didn't consider us relatives anymore, family anymore. And this sounds even worse in Hong Kong than in sort of like a Chinese society than even in other places, I think. And I have no idea what I did. Like, I don't think I've done anything like remotely. We never even had a disagreement, I think, or anything. And
Mm-hmm.
then so for her to say something that bad about me, um, without any reason,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, and yeah, and throwing me under the bus like that, I felt very upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the worst part. I think, because I'm okay with that now. Like, she is who she is, and her dad is who, like, like, it's not the most healthy family there either. Like, not that our family is so healthy. But what upset me was the reaction of the response of my parents to that, because they basically appeased the uncle and the daughter, um, and decided to go to the wedding. Then decided to go on a holiday with the parents after that wedding. All the while uh, leaving me with that, like, and then also pressuring me to go to all these social events where they would be, because
Huh.
because they wanted, to appear, a happy family, like and pretend nothing had happened and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, making me feel really bad for not being able to do that or not willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was at work and I was feeling really, really, really horrible because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this sort of like a turning moment, because at some point I remember telling myself, hey, you're not a bad human being. And then I realized how ridiculous that was, that I had to tell myself, hey, I'm not a bad human being, because I'm not, but, um, and then I just, I was at that point, I was like, this got to stop.
So in that incident, they didn't have your back. They just went along with these people who were cruel to you for the sake
Yes.
of appearances and didn't seem to have any
They,
empathy for what that meant for you. Is that
they
kind of the gist
yeah,
of it?
basically. I also, and I made efforts, to solve this too. So, like I made some proposals, and I discussed this with parents, and, like, and then I didn't, because like, I tried to solve this in a reasonable manner, like, and then one of them was, hey, I think it would maybe be a good idea if I had a chat with uncle, because I need to know how he thinks of this.
Yeah.
Because if he is inviting me
What
to a
is
dinner,
this?
if he's inviting me to a big social dinner, where everyone is going to be there, I don't want to be there if he really thinks that I did something to his daughter,
Yeah.
And then so I don't need an apology or anything, but like I do need to know where he stands on this. And then like I think my parents started freaking out because their words was like, oh, he's already apologizing by inviting you to the dinner. I'm like, no, that's not an apology, and that's not how things work. Like I need to know what he thinks of this.
Is that their pattern? Was that the pattern of growing up with them, that they didn't have empathy for you and didn't back you up and help you
Yep.
deal with bad situations?
Yeah.
Do you
So
think something's wrong with them? Like, are they nuts or?
I think they so so I'm in Hong Kong right now, but we grew up in an as immigrants in abroad,
Mhm.
and I think they've been living in an echo chamber because of that. Where I was actually reading. I don't know if you've read the book "Educated" by Tara Westover. It's an amazing book, New York Times bookseller. But she tells this tale of what it's like to be raised, to grow up in a family that's like a cult, where the parents are sort of the cult leaders, and where they tell the kids that the rest of the world cannot be trusted. Like, and her family was a very fundamentalist Mormon kind of family.
Mhm.
Um, and I think my family experience sort of mirrors that, in the sense that, like we were told that the rest of the rest of society is not, doesn't have the same values, like we are who we are and they are who they are. And so their rules doesn't apply to us, and you need to listen to us, to
Mhm.
me. Um, and also they didn't have anyone who could tell them anything.
So they were
Uh,
really isolated,
they were isolated. Yeah.
and they were
So,
they were shocked by the culture you were living in, I guess, and
yeah. And they
afraid of
isolated
what it would
themselves.
do to you, and
They
not
also,
without reason, because I don't know. I live in California. We have a lot of immigrants, and yeah, some of the kids, they really do go to pot, literally, figuratively. And I just noticed that in immigrant families, sometimes the parents are pretty strict, and for definitely good reasons, even if they're not pulling it off very well. Their motives are good, and in many cases, they do it very well. But we certainly have that here. We have probably some of the best students are kids with immigrant parents.
Yeah, I think it comes at a price that that most people don't see.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe you. Um, well, basically, it's kind of different from my background, but what I have in common with you is that it's very triggering to be around some family members. I feel blamed and criticized for reasons I have no idea what it is, and it kind of haunts me and eats me up. And as a general rule, I think it's good to have relationships with people as important as parents, and between parents and children, that's desirable. And the exception is if one party is so distressed that they're going to be terrible to the other one. And the goal is to just be neutral to everybody so that things are not triggering. I mean, if you walk down the street and somebody spits on you, you might even have to be neutral to that, but I don't mean to say that you have to put up with a bunch of terrible treatment from people. But the reaction that's coming up from inside, the goal is to neutralize that so you can just sort of sit there with adult consciousness and be like, wow, these people are really acting strangely. They seem to lack compassion. They're saying something weird. They probably have a few kind characteristics too. And I feel for them not having contact with you. I would hate that with my kids. That would be like the worst thing ever. But it also it sounds like there's something amiss with them. You know, if it's not culturally normal in your culture either.
Even in the culture, I think they lack a kind of self-reflection.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't think my like it's different from my dad and from my mom, but for my
Yeah.
dad, I don't think he really has any idea what he's been
Yeah.
doing or not been
Yeah.
doing. I think my mom has a better idea. And yeah, my dad is very distant, always has been very distant. And but my mom is much closer, but also therefore it feels a lot more dangerous because of that.
Yeah.
And they do trigger me still.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means for seeing them or not. You know, like if that's because yeah, I do. You know, like and to be honest, I still get upset and angry with some of the things they do and say, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not this. I wish I was this sort of better person that could stand above all this. And but yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I sympathize. We're not always the better person that we aim to be, but I do think that is the goal, not to just force yourself to see them if you're going to be unpleasant, and hurt them, and not if it's going to shake you up so much that you can't, like, I mean, in some cases, some people like seeing their parents would upset them so much they wouldn't be able to go to work for a week. And so that's not a good idea. But the goal is to become neutral enough that we can be loving people, even to people who are sick. They sound sick. They sound like they were either born like that or something was done to them, and they are clueless. They just don't even know. There's nothing they can do about it. And it's sad. It's sad for them, So I just would say, I think the goal is to get where you can deal with it because it's a good and loving thing to do. And to get there, to start to learn to be neutral and to have less of a reaction to things in general. And chances are, if you have this from your childhood, you probably have reactions to other things too, and it would help you to be less reactive and just to have a little bit more objectivity about stuff that's triggering until you're not very triggered anymore.
I have been making progress in other aspects of life, and being triggered by other things. So I think that's good. But my parents are kind of like the end boss in the game, where that's really the big challenge. And so
I know. Yeah. My mom died when I was 30. She died when I first started healing, actually, and my father died when I was 15. So and my brother, who was an addict, died when I was 31. So a lot of the people who were troubling for me were gone from my life, which has sort of made it simpler. But even so, really any family members at all. My family, when you take the whole extended family into account, pretty much I don't have a relationship with anybody. I'm in contact, with some people, but I feel like there's no closeness there, and I have no idea why. And it it's hard for me and I get triggered, and I have a couple of things that I can do about being triggered in those situations, because I just don't care to be triggered. And I'm somebody, I do want to have those relationships. I'm sort of standing by for them to improve if they will, perhaps. That would be happy for me if they would. And so one of them is, I do this daily practice, and I write fears and resentments on paper. I meditate, and I just, I become more neutral. There's a lot of things I get from that. I get re-regulated. When I'm upset, I get a little bit of inoculation against future dysregulation that day. I just get more steady inside. And I just have less, negative thoughts in my head, because I just got done doing it. I just had a little webinar, a Zoom meeting with actually I just with one person today, kind of teaching her how to do it. And we meditated together, and I feel really good. I was tired and frazzled, and I feel really good right now. So when I'm in that state, I can deal with stuff better. The other thing is, I have to have support to go into difficult situations like that. There's something about your parents. It's just so hard to let go of the idea. It's like they should be some way that they're not. They should be. And especially stuff we hear about, when we hear about anything mental health or families and good parenting, and then there's just this grief that happens because we didn't get that. We're never going to get it. And if your parents are still alive, they only barely get it or understand what's happening there. It's probably never going to happen. They're probably never going to come around. But I think love is this thing that we give sometimes without getting it back, without getting back what we had in mind and letting go of that expectation. And we know that it's possible to be a happy person even if parenting didn't happen very well. It's possible. It creates some struggle, and some people never get out from under it, but it's a lot better if you get out from under it and just can kind of accept that they're a bit weird, they're a bit broken, they're not capable of understanding. They want you back, they want you in their life. And I never recommend just pushing yourself into a situation where you're going to end up blowing up or breaking down or putting up with actual, getting berated. There's no need to go be berated. Certainly not into a violent situation. It sounds like you're not saying it is, but for some people it is. So forget that. But just sitting there being with people who are just nutty and selfish, there could come a time when you can do that without getting triggered.
Yeah, no, I think I am coming around to the idea that they are who they are, and accept that, and grieve for the parents I never had.
Yeah.
But I don't think that necessarily means I need to see them and get triggered and they get angry. So
yeah. Well, there it is then. You're the captain. You get to decide how you're going to do your life and not get drained by that type of thing. But yeah, since you're asking my opinion, I always just think if we possibly can do the loving thing.